Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. This is episode number 70. We have finally made it to number 70 after all this time. A big thank you to everyone from not just in Britain, but from around Europe and other parts of the world that tune in on a regular basis to hopefully not listen to me, but to listen to our guest or guests to hear what he, she, or they has to say. Thank you to I say loyal supporters. That probably overdoes it a bit, but people who tune in on a regular basis and who do send feedback. I love to receive feedback from those that are watching or listening. The Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast is brought to you by the Hare Krishna Project, which is a project based in the UK that is passionate about sharing Krishna consciousness with anyone who's willing to listen to it. And we produce this podcast as well to allow devotees and sometimes maybe even non-devotees to share their stories. Everyone has a story to tell. I'm pleased to welcome our 70th guest. Our 70th guest is Ajit Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
No worries. It's great to have you with us. So every guest gets the same question to start off with because it's a nice, easy one. So let's get started. Please tell us a bit about you and where you're from.
Yeah, so I am from Denmark. I joined ISKCON in 1998, or that's where I read the Bhagavad Gita first, and then you can say I visited the temple then the year after, and immediately joined the community, and have been practicing since. So I live in a small city in Denmark with my wife and my small daughter. We have a daughter; she's like 20 weeks old. So
wow,
my time goes with that. I've been like preaching wise or devotee, what my services has been. Primarily I've been very, very engaged in two things in my devotional life. One is debating atheism. So I've studied a lot of logic and really getting into this whole thing about debating atheism. And then the other thing is I've used a lot of time on debating the book changes, which is our topic tonight. Of course, I've also done many other kinds of services here and there and so on, but I've just focused mainly on trying to study Srila Prabhupada's books and the teachings, becoming serious in that regard, and then everything that has to do with philosophy. I'm interested in everything, so debating. But then when I got into the topic about the book changes, I was able to apply a lot of what I've learned about logic and argumentation and so on, in order to kind of what I consider is defending Srila Prabhupada's original books against those who would like to change them. So yeah.
Before we get on to that, which is the kind of main reason we're chatting this evening, just tell us a bit about what was happening in your life in 1998. Why did you join the Hare Krishna movement? Were you searching for something spiritual? Did you have a religious upbringing? Kind of what was going on in your life 25 years ago?
Yeah, so I did not have a religious upbringing at all, but somehow when I was, and I'll try to make the story short, but I was, my grandmother, when I was 3 years old, she asked me to pray. I can't remember what it's called in English, but this prayer, give us our daily bread and so on. This prayer, and she was praying that, and I was asking, what is this? And she was explaining about God, and I was asking, but who is he? Who's God? And she told me, and immediately I was curious, like how, because I thought he sounded quite fantastic. So how could I be sure that he existed? So I asked her, how can I know? And she told me this story that one day she was walking home from church and she dropped one of her what's called psalm books, like this books they're singing psalm from. And when she got home, it was not there. And then she had a dream at night. She dreamt it was lying somewhere. And the next day she went there and it was there. So that convinced me. I was very young. So I believed in God until I was like 12 years old. And puberty hits in. It was not very popular. I wanted to drink and have fun. So I spent my teen years, in a haze of different kinds of, funny substances. And I think it kind of had some positive effect in the sense that it kind of broadened my consciousness, and I got interested in spiritual things. First, a lot of psychology, and then spiritual matters. So when I was around 19, I started getting serious about spiritual life, and I was doing meditation and into the whole New Age movement. And then I was constantly asking, like, what is the highest? What is the highest? And I read some of these New Age guys' books, and they were like, there was a sentence. He said that the purpose of life is to surrender completely to God and just be an instrument in His service. So that was even before I read Prabhupada's books. I was just, wow, this is amazing. That is what I want. So I tried to do that in my own kind of speculative way. And I went to the public library to look for spiritual books. I heard about Sai Baba and, something from India. And I saw Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita was in there. So I took it out, but I thought, it's kind of old. Like, I'm not going to read this. So I was there 3 times in the library. And the third time, each time I had the Bhagavad Gita in my hands. But the third time I actually opened it. And there was like this verse, like, I'm the source of all spiritual and material worlds, everything emanates from me. And I was thinking, like, I'm looking for God. Here's someone, he's claiming to be God. I have to read this book. I took it home. I read the introduction first, and I was convinced immediately that the person writing this, it could not be something he just made up. It must be the truth. That just had this feeling. So already there, I started. And I was practicing on my own for like half a year before I went to see the devotees. So I was in contact with the temple. I got a bead bag and got some prasadam and some books. So I was chanting with my left hand, and I was chanting really slow. I couldn't figure out how it was possible to chant, 16 rounds in 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to chant 4 rounds. So, but then when I got to the temple, I explained everything, and then I just started to practice. So that was like kind of
wow. And you were like you were 19 at the time.
I was 19 when I was 21 when I joined. I was 19 when I started spiritual life, but 21 when I read the Bhagavad Gita.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's 25 years ago now. So
and now, which we're about to talk about, you've become, I guess, a great defender of the Bhagavad Gita.
I mean, I try to do my best.
Good.
To defend it. I was maybe we can just jump into the talk about the book changes. But the first time I heard about them, I was just very new in the temple, and I was fed this narrative which still goes on today, that, well, it's just some minor changes, some capitalizations, some commas, some common, like, obvious mistakes were fixed in order to make the book better. And I just believed that blindly. I had this, like, if it was the devotee saying it, it must be true. So I was not skeptical at all. And I also heard that those who were against the changes, they were very envious of ISKCON, typically some frustrated devotee who did not, get to have a position in ISKCON, and now were angry, trying to destroy the movement and so on by telling lies. I heard about the Ritviks and so on, and it was like, if you were against changes to Prabhupada's books, then you must be a Ritvik also. So I believed that till 2012. So that was like at least 12, 13 years or something like that, maybe even more, 14 years. I just took that for granted. I've never questioned anything I never heard about. But then, some things happened in my devotional life. There were some issues, I thought, with the leadership here in Denmark, and also, read online several other things about the leadership of ISKCON. I disagreed with certain things. So as these disagreements, there became more and more disagreements between, me and the leadership of ISKCON. I kind of developed like the thought that maybe some of those who criticize it, maybe they're actually more right than I used to think. So I started to investigate, and that's, I read Kailash Chandra, which we had a few episodes ago. And I read his text and I thought he was like brilliant. He was not angry. He was cool-headed. He was just describing historical facts. And as in one of his articles, he just, in 1 or 2 sentences, he just talked about the book changes and that they were, it was not good. So immediately I thought, well, I need to look into this. And I think it took me half an hour to search the internet and find examples of changes, which I thought, that's really strange change. I could see no way to justify these types of changes.
Mm.
And then, gradually I just got more and more into it until I decided to make my website. I have a website, rsaprayoga.com. Rsaprayoga, of course, referring to this principle that it's not, you cannot just change the Acharya's words, at least not without the Acharya's permission. So yeah, so that's how I got into the whole thing about the book changes.
Can we, I guess, kind of add some context to that? Because I've been around ISKCON for almost 20 years. And I guess like you, I've always been aware of changes to Prabhupada's books, but you kind of just accept what you're told, that, they've just had a bit of editing, a bit of amendments because something wasn't spelt correctly or something was grammatically incorrect. Yeah. And everyone accepts it, or everyone knows that Prabhupada's books have been changed, even the organization of ISKCON, because they've overseen the changes to the books. So everyone accepts that. And there's different editions of different books, particularly the Bhagavad Gita is the obvious one that springs to mind. But people have different views on the reasons and the motives for those changes. Are you able to, because a lot of people will be watching this and not be aware of the more kind of political issues around the changes to Prabhupada's books, can you maybe, if possible, from 1978 or from the early 80s, are you able to give us an overview of the changes to Prabhupada's books, in particular who changed them, and what did they change, or why ISKCON was overseeing the changes? So I guess yes. So who changed them and why?
Yeah. So to my knowledge, the changes have been made mostly by Ajit Swami. At least he made the whole Bhagavad Gita. He's working together with Srila Prabhupada, and they're kind of running the operation. I know they've had several others, like I know they spoke about one female devotee, I can't remember her name. But I think that these two have been overseeing the changes and making the changes. And I think today Advaita is not at least officially involved, but Srila is still making changes to the books. And it's an ongoing thing. It's not that they have stopped changing, it's just ongoing. I know from some insider knowledge that the website called vedabase.io, which are the BBTI's website, I know that the person who is running that site, they are constantly sending him changes, so he needs to go into the website and like change the individual books, like on a regular basis. Yeah.
So it's predominantly the Bhagavad Gita. There's a 1983 edition that ISKCON now officially, it's the official version that ISKCON promotes and sells.
Yeah.
So the 1983 is the office one of Bhagavad Gita. Are there any other books of Prabhupada's that have been changed or edited since 1978?
Oh yeah. The Srimad Bhagavatam has been changed, and they're still working on it. Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, and also many of the smaller books, I think like Beyond Birth and Death, and I can't remember all of them from the top of my head, but
kind of Beyond Birth and Death, Life Comes from Life. I only know because I've been sent a load of the old original copies recently. Perfect question. Yeah. Perfect questions, perfect answers.
Yeah.
Topmost yoga system.
Yeah. I think their plan is to go through all of them.
So, we've kind of both mentioned already, but what are ISKCON, the establishment of ISKCON, what are they changing in these books?
Yeah, they're changing different things. I think looking into what they did to Bhagavad Gita is a very good way to get an overview. So they're not we're not talking about they're making major philosophical changes or but they're changing many things, and it's not really very well organized, and it's not very well planned. So there are many inconsistencies in the way they're changing, and sometimes a mistake is also made. And sometimes these mistakes are also philosophical in nature. And of course, we can also say, I would argue that the whole idea of making changes is a philosophical mistake in itself. But they are doing many things, like they're inserting things, taking things out, changing words, changing Srila Prabhupada's personally typewritten Sanskrit translations, like the synonyms for each word. They are changing them also. So it's basically, of course, changing the covers, and the paintings in the books. The backside of Bhagavad Gita, which was very nice in the first 72 edition, with a lot of glorification of Prabhupada, has been completely changed. Changing chapter headings, just so many different types of things. And their justification is usually, or what I used to say, is their claim to fame is that they are making the books closer to what Srila Prabhupada originally said in his manuscripts. And this can be documented that they do that in some cases, but in most, or at least many, many cases, they're not doing that. They're actually just putting their own words in the books. And some would say that, well, if it's just small things that they're not changing the meaning, then it doesn't matter. But Srila Prabhupada, he was very, even according to Ajit Swami, he was very adamant that there should be no needless changes. So, and there are many strange needless changes, just like small words here and there, just change, which does not go back to any manuscript, but which is simply the words of Jayadvaita Swami. And then you have like a more, I don't know if you can call it, I've just, now some examples come to mind, but like, for example, the chapter heading of chapter 6, which is Sankhya Yoga, in Prabhupada's original 72 edition, that was changed to Dhyana Yoga. And that's because some of the previous acharyas used the word Jnana Yoga for that chapter. And the problem is that when we research how Prabhupada spoke about the chapter, there are so many quotes in his lectures where he refers to the chapter as the Sankhya Yoga chapter. So there is no justification. Even Jayadvaita, he was writing that, well, I'm not actually quite certain about this change. Maybe it should not have been done. What do you think? You can write me if you disagree. I wrote him, and he didn't answer. I've been in a few exchanges with him, but he stopped responding. I actually sent him and Dravida and the BBTI several articles and several questions of concern, and they didn't respond. So I made a small ebook called "No Reply" from BBTI, and kind of like these.
I love it.
I presented these, to them. Yeah. So that's on my website also. The small book on arsaprayoga.com.
No reply. I love that. I will make sure with this broadcast that your website is listed.
Yeah, thank you.
Just very quickly, I've got to add this in. There's a devotee group in London called Bliss, and when they're out distributing books, one of the regular responses that people give is, "I haven't got no time," I've got no time to talk to you. So they produced a book called No Time. So when anyone, I've got no time, well, here's the perfect book for you. It's nice. Yeah. Okay. So my next question was going to be, what are your thoughts on Srila Prabhupada's books being changed? But I think I know your thoughts. It's obvious what your thoughts are. So my next question would be, What do you think this does? The changing or the editing of Prabhupada's books. What do you think this does to the authenticity of the original texts?
Yeah, it removes the authenticity and it creates doubts in people. So even if you have just simple changes, if they are not documented, if you have a book and you have two different editions, you can see there are changes. Then if there is no way to figure out why was this change made, who made it, is it authorized by the author, then of course doubts will arise in your mind when you're reading, is this really the author speaking or is it someone else? So this undermines our preaching, this undermines people's bhakti. So that's what I think is really important about this whole issue, that even small changes can be very, and of course also because it is offensive, according to the article principle, it's actually an offense against the author, especially when we're talking about devotional or like acharyas. You simply can't do that. At least the default position is that you cannot change the master's works. There is a nice example by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was asked to edit the book of his own guru, and he said he wouldn't do that. He said that even if the spiritual master writes something that ordinarily only a fool would write, like maybe some Sanskrit, he gets some Sanskrit wrong. I think that the thing is he writes Vishnaye instead of Vishna Ye or something. I can't remember the exact what it is. So then it should not be corrected because Krishna will accept the sentiment either way. Prabhupada mentioned this many times also, and there are also similar examples. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also said that there are many examples of faults in the devotional literature of previous acharyas, but these should not be corrected. And so this is, in my view, the default position. So the only thing that could justify changing Srila Prabhupada's books is that if Srila Prabhupada explicitly demanded or instructed these changes to be made. And he did while he was here, and he gave some instructions. But as soon as he leaves his body, then the only thing, in my view, we can change is that if we have some written document that Prabhupada said, I want this changed. For example, Prabhupada, we have it in writing. We wanted cattle racing changed to cow protection. And I think there are between 3, 4, 5 things Prabhupada wanted changed, which we have in writing. But if we don't, then we can't ask him, is this okay? And we don't know if we are overriding his editorial decisions, because he had conversations with Hayagriva Prabhu. At least for 3 months, they were working together on a daily basis. And Hayagriva, he wrote that I'm consulting Prabhupada with nearly every verse. So if we go in and try to change something back, even if it was written in the manuscript, well, maybe Hayagriva, he consulted Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, yes, make that change. This also reminds me about another thing, is that there's evidence, also written evidence, that Prabhupada accepted the verses from the 1968 edition. He said, you can keep these verses. So the verses are actually authorized. So if you take these verses and then again change them back to something which you find, they call it a manuscript, but it functions just like a draft. So you basically just, if I write a book, I have a draft, I send it to you, changes are made, I accept these changes, and then someone comes along after I'm dead and finds the old drafts and wants to change my book back to that. I wouldn't accept that. So we're in a kind of similar situation with Prabhupada's books, but even worse is that they are putting their own words in that Prabhupada never spoke. There is a change. Prabhupada, in one of his verses, he wrote secret wisdom, and that was changed to knowledge and realization. And Prabhupada, he just didn't say that. It's not his words. It might not be wrong, it might not change the philosophy, but it wasn't what he said. He said secret wisdom. So
there's I'm not sure if this made the news headlines in Denmark, but certainly in the UK, around 4 months ago or 5 months ago, there was, I can't remember if it happened, I think it happened, but there was uproar when the public found out that Roald Dahl's books were going to be changed. So
Mm,
Roald Dahl is a famous author. He's passed away now. And Penguin Books, who I think own the copyright to his books, I think they
ah,
wanted to make, or they were making changes to his books to make them more politically correct.
yeah,
So using up-to-date language. So for example, and initially I was unsure what they were changing.
yeah,
And I'll give you an example. Initially, because we were aware that Roald Dahl had some anti-Semitic views. So
mm,
initially, my thought was, well, maybe those if he made any anti-Semitic comments, maybe they need to change. But actually, it was nothing to do with that at all. They were changing words like I think in the book The Witches, he refers to the ugly witches, and apparently that's offensive. You can't say ugly, so you have to change the word ugly. And then one
yeah,
of the boys in one of the stories is a fat boy. You can't say fat because it's offensive, so it was changed. And actually,
yeah,
you're watering down the original meanings of what the
yeah,
author wanted to an extent
yeah,
that it doesn't become the author's work anymore. And obviously, you can't
yeah.
compare Roald Dahl to Prabhupada, but there's similarities there, so people can understand
Yeah,
it.
it's the same thing. It's just like I've heard many devotees say, also senior devotees here in Denmark, they try to convince me not to do this publicly because what they're saying is that this is not for us, this is not for you, it's not for me, and especially not for the new devotees because this is a very high esoteric thing. Only the top leaders of ISKCON can sit in their secret meetings and solve this dilemma. We are just the humble servants, we can't basically think for ourselves. And I was thinking like, but this is like kindergarten stuff. I mean, I'm a school teacher. I know kids, 10 years old would be able to understand the principle.
Mm.
My non-devotee family, my non-devotee friends, immediately when I tell them, they think, okay, this is really strange. They want to do that. So I kind of come to the conclusion that it's only if you have been, I guess, brainwashed in some way
Mm.
by, you're in this kind of cult and they're telling you this is the narrative, you have to believe it, or otherwise you're doomed, or um, just, they're basically telling lies about what happened to the books. I don't like to say that because I would like to keep my language just in a more neutral way, but objectively speaking, they have been lying, or they are lying about what they have done to the books. And anyone can understand it. It's not for sophisticated, highly educated editors or anything like high class, Uttamadhikaris to evaluate this. It's just super, super simple. Yeah. So it's,
So why do you think the devotee community, as in the global ISKCON community, has, I guess, on a very big mass scale, accepted the book changes, and why do they kind of just go along with it?
I think it starts with this misinformation about what the changes are, like how they were made and what types of changes were made. And then people, they buy into, the whole ISKCON community, the whole devotional community. They get a spiritual master, they get initiated. Now all of a sudden they have to follow their spiritual master and they have to kind of defend him.
Mm.
And so if he says the book changes are good, then you have to do that also. And then there's the fear of being ostracized, or that you cannot come to the temple, or you cannot participate in programs. So I think it becomes kind of fear-based, but in the beginning, it's mostly, I think it's just people just blindly accepting the narrative they've heard. It's every time I meet someone online or debate someone, they start to defend the changes, and it becomes obvious they don't know anything. They haven't studied the changes at all. Or they maybe, if they were lucky, they heard some YouTube video, or they went to BBT Edit, their website. And in that website, there is a lot of carefully selected changes. They have just taken the changes which they think they can justify and put it there, but there are like hundreds of other changes which are not on that website. So that way you can kind of become fooled into this narrative that the changes are good. and you become afraid speaking up against it. You become afraid of studying it. I think that's the usual problem I meet, because I've actually convinced quite a few devotees myself, just like personally. I like to just speak one-on-one with people and then just say, try to look at this change, Let us not just yell and scream and throw things at each other. Please let us look at this specific example. What do you think? And then gradually, some devotees think actually, yeah, okay, I can justify that. It's unjustifiable. Why did they do that? And then gradually, so in Denmark here, it has been quite a fight and quite a schism. I think like more or less half the devotees here are against the changes. The other half is for, and like the community is divided in two. And I just think it's necessary, because these changes, they have to stop.
And the half of the devotee community in Denmark that are against the changes, is that largely because of the work that you've done in raising awareness of them?
I think I did at least a lot of like most of the job in bringing awareness to it. There's also been other devotees. First of all, like devotees have been discussing this since the changes were made first. So I came in 2012. So I'm clearly building on other people's work. And here in Denmark, there's another devotee called he was called Bhakta Torben. He used to be initiated by Hare Krishna, chose to go by his non-devotee name because he renounced his guru. So he also made, I think, more than 300 examples he found, and we made that into a book. And we have my book. It's like my book is a little different than his, so they go well together. And it's also about like 300 pages. My book, the ebook I made. So this work, kind of convinced people gradually, and we had discussions also with devotees. Yeah.
You mentioned you gave the figure of 300 changes, but there have been far more changes or edits than that, right?
Yeah. So what we did was that we wanted to find the changes that could convince people that they have done something wrong. So we have not documented every comma or every small thing, but kind of like Torben, he found like 300 changes that he commented on, which he thought were, how can you say, interesting, or kind of prove that the book should not have been changed, that they have done something they shouldn't. And he was very focused on making short texts about the changes, and making a very valuable small analysis showing the changes. And I have made like more elaborate argumentations. I've also written open letters to certain gurus like Hare Krishna, and made some rebuttals, some comments to certain things Srila Maharaj said, and also open letter to Srila Swami. Different devotees trying to argue from different angles of vision.
And in terms of gurus or sannyasis or leaders in ISKCON, one of my questions was going to be, what's the response? Which I think you've already kind of answered that. But do you think, I think, for example, there's around 82 initiating gurus in ISKCON.
Yeah.
Are they all going with the party line, or are they some of them that privately, secretly would actually kind of take your view or the stance that you take on book editing?
I think that there are quite a few who would take the stand I take, but they do it secretly. They're afraid to say it. I've heard several examples. I know several devotees who like to meet these gurus and speak with them, and ask them these questions. So I know there are some, and I also know of certain gurus who used to be like that, but when they then became gurus and kind of got into the whole guru business, so to speak, they suddenly changed their minds, and now the changes are okay. And you said that I could mention names, so I heard that about Radhanath Swami. I heard that about what is it called? Vaisheshika. Yeah, Vaisheshika Guru. Then there are others who I think are a little bit more like not afraid to say it, but they wouldn't state it publicly. But like I know Mahavishnu Goswami, who is from Scotland. I think, is he from Scotland or
He's
Ireland?
from England. He's from
He's from
England.
England.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Him. Yeah, that's just what I can remember now. But I think also the way ISKCON is run now, with the oath of allegiance that everyone needs to sign, you know, I will follow the party line. I will not discuss certain things in public. So no one, like the gurus, they're kind of, you know, forced not to, they can't be straightforward. So they're kind of like just a servant or a kind of representative of the official party line. So, but I know that there are many who think the changes should not have been made.
I was just trying to look up, you know, if you Google changes to Srila Prabhupada's books, there's lots of websites and there's lots of references. One devotee recently told me, I mean, I haven't looked into it, but one devotee recently told me there have been around 5,000 changes or edits.
Yeah, I think that's also what I've heard. It makes sense. And this also, of course, includes smaller changes. But I don't know if you saw the article made by Rubanuga and his wife, where they do some statistics. Have you seen that?
No. I've just found on one particular website there's five that they reference there to be 5,000 changes and counting.
Yeah, I don't know of anyone who has really, you know, count them all. But if you go to the website bookchangers.com, there is like the website is made so that you have the original book on one side and you have it changed on the other.
Oh, I can see.
And
Yeah,
then, like this computer program is actually telling you how many discrepancies there are. So I think it's some, you know, from that they have it is 5,000, but I'm not quite sure. But
wow.
so, certainly, I think so. I was just looking for this. See if I can find it just to give you some statistics. 1 second.
I mean, it's only for me personally, it's only been probably the last 2 years that I've been aware. I mean, I've always been aware that Prabhupada's books have been edited, but I've been aware of the more, you know, the bigger issues surrounding it.
Yeah.
You know, and understanding that changing the original author's books, particularly when they're spiritual books, it's a whole nother thing, isn't it? It's
it is.
It's like some more traditional Christian groups will try and read the original King James version of the Bible, the first one that was translated into English, rather than the more newer ones like the Good News Bible, because they think it has more of the authenticity of what Jesus and other teachers were talking about.
Yeah, that's precisely it. So we can see that so many changes. Like I just have it here. It's like 77% of all the verses in the Gita have been changed. So that's a lot. It's actually 541 verses have been changed. And in certain chapters, like chapter 11, we are chapter 17, it's 93% have been changed.
And that's also, as well as verses, that's the purports as well. Changes to.
This is only the verses.
Wow.
And it says that in 21 verses, only, that's 3%. It was only the spelling, punctuation, and capitalization that was changed. And the words were left intact. In 520 verses, which is 74%, words were removed, rearranged, or inserted. So it's like they say, well, they only changed some spelling, punctuation, and capitalization. But no, it's actually only in 21 verses they did that. In 520, words were removed, rearranged, or inserted. That's a huge difference. And this is only the verses. I did my own study of the because we know the first 5 or 6 chapters of the Gita, everything was typewritten personally by Srila Prabhupada on a typewriter. So in the word for word or the word synonyms, I was looking there, and it was, I can't remember, it's like more than 100 changes in that chapter to his personally typewritten Sanskrit translations, just changed to something else, like they thought they could do it better. I also have some statistics on that, where they're just completely changed his own translation. I think this is really strange. I think that because I know my wife, she has studied Sanskrit, so there might be something which were up for discussion, but I think Prabhupada kind of his way of translating things is, this Bhava translation, he tries to get the spirit in the text, he tries to get that out. He doesn't want to be like every single translation needs to be on point, like literally. It doesn't have to be totally literally. It just has to be like, what is the meaning behind this? And since we cannot ask Prabhupada if he wanted these changes, how can we make them? There are many. It's a speculation. I'm always saying that we need to have what's called a principle of what is it called in English? Like there should be a principle of caution. You can't change if maybe something or perhaps something. No, you need to know with 100% certainty that Prabhupada wanted a specific change, otherwise you can't change it. And we see, certain types of mistakes being made, which were also because we have to think that it was changed in 83. So how old was Jayadvaita in 83? He joined in somewhere in the mid-70s. Like he was a pretty young guy, actually. And even the gurus, I think the youngest guru of these 11 Somalacharyas, it was like in his first 20s. And the oldest was Kirtanananda, who was maybe 32. So we are talking about really new devotees, really, really new devotees. They might have had personal association with Prabhupada, and they might have done many wonderful things, but they were new devotees. And we can't expect them to know the philosophy and Prabhupada's teaching so deeply. And this also results in certain, funny, I think kind of funny changes. It just reminds me that there was this word mad was removed. I see if I can find this change actually that was here. If I can just read this or just tell about it. So there is a place in Bhagavad Gita where Jayadvaita, like in the original Bhagavad Gita, it said, sometimes we understand that I'm happy, I am mad, I'm a woman, I'm a dog, I'm a cat. These are the knowers. So this is then changed to in the 83 edition. Sometimes we think I'm happy, I am a man, I'm a woman, I'm a dog, I'm a cat. These are the bodily designations of the knower. So there are quite a few things change here, but one is that Jayadvaita, he's like adamant that this mad is wrong. Prabhupada said, I'm happy, I'm mad. This is, in the 72 edition. But he writes here, Jayadvaita writes, the words in the first editions are straight out nonsense. They are not right, they are not sacred, they are not the words of my spiritual master. So he is of the opinion that it should have been, I'm a man, I'm a woman, because Prabhupada is kind of making these opposites, I'm happy, I'm mad, I'm a woman, I'm a dog, I'm a cat. So he thinks it should be, I'm a man, I'm a woman. But if you know Srila Prabhupada's teachings a little bit, you know that Prabhupada very often had mad and happy as opposites. And I just found so many quotes where Prabhupada is saying that. Don't, like this one, don't be very much happy when you are in happy condition of life, neither you become mad in miserable condition of life. And the list just goes on, that for Prabhupada, madness and happiness are opposites. So this is the kind of, to me, it shows that Jayadvaita is not qualified to make these kinds of changes. He at the point he made it, he didn't understand Prabhupada's teachings properly. And even if he disagrees with me, still we don't know. So should it be man or should it be mad? Well, if we don't know, how can we just go in and change it? One change justifies the next. Principles and the criteria we have for one change, you can also apply them for other changes. And then it just goes on and on and on. I want to change this, I want to change that. Then when Advaita and Prabhupada leaves their bodies, then another important devotee will consider himself, the next to make changes. And we know they're also talking about changing these Prabhupada's books to be more politically correct. That's also up there for discussion. So I guess in 100 years, the books are public domain, and anyone can do whatever they like to the books. And that's why we need to preserve the original books. It is so important. And there might be mistakes in the books here and there. We can write, a separate booklet detailing, the most important ones. And then people who are interested, they can get that booklet, or they can speak with the devotees, get some explanations. And that's the best in my opinion. I think, an appendix in the book could also be made, but I'm just a little bit like, for me, personally, I just like the book as it is, no changes at all. This was just the way it was due to circumstances. They were busy. He had his editors, mistakes were made. Who cares? We just want it authentic. And anyone who wants to discuss certain things, make a booklet, make a commentary. And then we don't have to be afraid that the book will be changed. Even if someone will change in the future, if we can't stop them, at least we will have the original books. But the original books, they were out of the market for 12 years. They tried to suppress them completely and eliminate them, just have them basically destroyed.
Was that from 1983 onwards, or?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I've heard before they actually were able to print. There were court cases, and they made a settlement with the KBI, Krishna Books Incorporated. They were licensed to print the original books. And then, it took some time before that happened. And they started with the Bhagavad Gita, but changes are being made to all the books all the time. So it's like it's a lot of work. So
I don't know if intrigue is the word, but I've been I think, just let's use the word disturbed. I've been quite disturbed how ISKCON has been trying to ensure that the original 1972 edition is not sold anywhere, is not distributed anywhere, is not given out anywhere. And when you start to look around and you do your kind of online shopping and you talk to devotees, you find you can get hold of the 1972 edition of the Bhagavad Gita, but you can't go to an ISKCON temple to get a copy if you're very lucky. I mean, I'm not. And actually, you find there are devotees kind of on the quiet or from the back of their bedroom or from their garage distributing these books. And then you find you actually can find it online. I'm not going to name the websites, but there are websites where you can get a copy of the 1972 Bhagavad Gita. One devotee sent me a link just 3 days ago, and I have downloaded it to file in case that website goes down. There's actually other books as well, but it is a big file, lots of megabytes, but I have a copy of the 1972 edition. And then you hear stories of how ISKCON is trying to suppress them being printed, trying to stop them being printed. In terms of lawsuits and legal issues. And even in Christianity, for all of its faults, and I've talked about some Christian, I've given the example of some traditional Christians will want the King James Version, but they don't stop other people reading other translations. Generally in Christianity, there's an acceptance. Well, that's that translation. That's that translation. You're not kicked out of the church for it. We just have a little chat about it and accept that they're different. But ISKCON is very much on the offensive, isn't it? We're making sure that the 72 edition is not distributed anywhere.
And it's spoken bad about. Ajahn also said it had warts. So it's like speaking about sacred books like that. I don't understand how it's possible. But that's what they're doing. I was just recently in Vrindavan, and you can go in the temple, and at the top shelf behind some other books, there was one Bhagavad Gita 72 edition, hiding. And also in the local Danish temple, I heard it for a period of time, they had them, at the shelves just somewhere where no one could see it. And I'm sure that if someone tried to buy it, they would get, they will get full preaching on why they should take the other one instead. People have been, kicked out of the temple for doing this. And the only reason they're not doing it so much now is because of the social media. It's like you can't stop it anymore. You can't stop the information from getting out. You're just making it worse for yourself if you start to talk so much about it. But if you become too antagonistic toward like that with the Swami and the institution is going to do these changes, then you're at a risk. Like I'm not welcome in many places, like in Denmark and in Finland. At least I know I'm still not welcome. I don't know.
That was actually going to be one of my questions towards the end. What is your relationship with the institution of ISKCON now, with the temples in Denmark? I mean, do you attend at all?
No, I don't. My relationship with the institution ISKCON is that, I consider myself a follower of Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON. I don't think anyone has the right to kick me out of Prabhupada's original ISKCON. But I've just come to the point that, I'm not going to put up with things like that. I'm not going to be a blind follower. So if someone in the leadership says something and I disagree, then I want to be able to disagree. I don't feel a need to go around shouting with banners outside the temple to make a point. I just would like to disagree, and I would like to use my social platforms to disagree openly. I would never go to the temple, shout and scream if they don't want me to about they changed the books. If I were to come to the temple, I'll just behave normally like a normal guy, respect their rules. But I want to be able to write what I want online without being kicked out of the temple. So that's I don't know how ISKCON considers me. I consider myself a member of Srila Prabhupada's original ISKCON. Fortunately, my own spiritual master also was against the book changes. He would always carry around, the original Gita. He had this 1-volume Bhagavatam, which was actually printed in 91. There are some few changes, but at that point you couldn't get the original Bhagavatam unless you had it from something that was printed. So he was always, reading that. So that way I feel kind of safe that my own spiritual master was also against the changes. So.
And do you want to share the name of your spiritual master with our audience?
Yeah, it is Mahavishnu Goswami. So there's a Mahavishnu Swami and a Mahavishnu Goswami. So I always have to explain that. So the Mahavishnu Swami is from England, and the Mahavishnu Goswami, he is born in India. He joined in England, but he's of Indian origin, Indian-bodied, and he left this world in 2010. So, yeah, he was alive, I think around 90 years old when he left his body.
Wow. And it's encouraging to hear that he was also not in favor of the book changes, and it's great that he shared that with you, and I no doubt his other disciples as well. Yeah,
he did. I guess he was not. From what I heard from some of my godbrothers is that he just knew that ISKCON is just so full of politics. They have their own agendas. It doesn't make much of a difference trying to, change their minds. So he said he wanted to create a pure wing under ISKCON where everything was done correctly. So that was he was trying to do that. But I just couldn't, be quiet when I realized what they actually did to the books. And I thought that even though many other devotees have done some wonderful work, I thought that some things could be done better. So what I did is I kind of went into the changes a little bit more, researching different things, what was in the manuscripts, what was in the lectures, what did the previous acharyas say about this. So that if you read my analysis of the changes, I think you'll get a more deeper understanding of you know, the issues surrounding that specific change than in many other places. So I felt that was kind of my contribution. I always considered that I was kind of making bullets that other people could shoot, like articles, so others could pick up the link, shoot it. Social media, I also created a YouTube channel where I'm kind of reading some of the changes. It's not very high quality, this YouTube channel, but it works.
And what kind of response are you getting? What, I mean, do you get devotees get in touch with you, ask you questions about book changes and various things?
Yeah, I do that. It's a mostly positive response, but I think over the last 10 years, things have happened. More devotees know about the book changes and what has happened. So there's a lot of support. And I also felt that in the beginning, when I did this work, a lot of devotees tried to attack me, but actually feel how, the leadership was sending certain people into online forums to debate me about it, to try to defeat me. And also other devotees, of course. Also, the Danish leadership tried to do something like that. But they gradually figured out they couldn't do it. They just have to be honest and just tell them, look at this change, please try to justify it. And it becomes obvious to everyone they can't do that. So now there's never anyone who tries to defend the changed books. It's very seldom. I also had, an exchange with Ajit Krishna, and I think in the end he just couldn't go online defending it anymore. He knew that everywhere he was, I was also, and it was just, I think he really disliked me for that. But he was in the exchange we had, he was very dishonest, and he wrote a book about logical fallacies, and in the exchange with me, he committed all the logical fallacies of his own book, and I ended up showing that to him, like, in your book you wrote this, now you're saying this. And after that I didn't hear from him anymore. So yeah, I just think it's really just the level of dishonesty and corruption, and I want to be someone special. I want to have this position. It amazes me. Like, I don't know what their agenda is. I also made it a point not to get too much into conspiracy theories about what they actually thought within their mind when they did it. I just want to show what they did, and that should be enough.
I think I'm generally the same as you. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just choose not to be. I think things just are what they are. ISKCON has changed the books, and my subjective personal opinion is they shouldn't. That it kind of is not, not appropriate. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist. For a number of reasons.
yeah. I mean, we know there are demons in the world, and we know the demons try to control everything, and we know that there are corrupt people and bad devotees and so on. So it's nothing new. We don't have to make a kind of theory of it. It's just all in Prabhupada's books anyway. So there are some things, some people just don't behave as they should. That's it.
Are you yourself distributing any of Prabhupada's original books? Do you do that in Denmark?
Not right now. I live in a small city by myself, and working as a school teacher here. So, but I was out with books for like 1 year, right? With the original books, and it was an amazing experience. So I just really love being on the streets, talking to people, and distributing. I try to help people distribute. I just gave a donation to a devotee here from Denmark who's distributing the original book so that he could get some books. But mostly I'm not on the street. I also have some health issues. My bag can't carry all these books. I have all these excuses.
Well, I wanted to ask that question. Yeah. I wanted to ask because I didn't want to trample on your feet, but I wanted to ask that question before I say that we do distribute Prabhupada's original books. Us at the Hare Krishna project, How did it start? We wanted to do festivals and kirtans and events and the podcast, and we try and reach out to Westerners and have an adult mature conversation about Krishna consciousness without all the trappings of Indian culture.
Yeah.
And then one of our team members received a message from another devotee about a year ago to say, "Hey, do you want some of Srila Prabhupada's original 1972 Bhagavad Gitas?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, you know." So all of a sudden, they turned up. There was 300 to start with, and we have now received another 100. So we have around 140 left. We've distributed quite a lot. We have about 140 of Prabhupada's original Bhagavad Gitas left, and we
The
are
pocket.
wait.
Was it
Yes, it's the
pocket
pocket.
book?
It's the pocket. Yeah,
Yeah.
not unfortunately not the bigger one, the pocket one.
Ah, but the
And
pocket
I've
is
actually got
also
one in my
nice.
car at the moment. So I do a
Yeah.
lot of traveling, and when I've got 10 minutes here and there, I just read a few more pages. I'm currently rereading the
Yeah.
1972 edition
Yeah.
just to kind of for my own spiritual pursuit, I guess. But we
Yeah.
have currently in stock 130 Bhagavad Gita's 1972 pocket size, which we're distributing. And
Yeah.
because we've kind of put our head above the parapet and because we said we're distributing books, you find that devotees start to come out of the woodwork and say, "Hey, I've got some books you can have." Because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say his name. I don't know if he listens to this podcast. One devotee in one city in England, that doesn't narrow it down too much. He contacted me and said, "Hey, I have some books that you can have. Um, you want them?" I was like, "Yeah, definitely, anything for free." Right. So he said, "It's about 100 books. What's your address?" So I gave him my address. He told me that they weren't the 1972 Bhagavad Gitas, but they were original Prabhupada books. So I said, I gave him my address. Anyway, there was 400 that came.
Oh, okay.
And I think the books I've mentioned, it's Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, The Topmost Yoga System, Life Comes from Life, another one. Anyway, he told
Beyond Birth
me,
and Death.
Beyond Birth and Death, that's it. Anyway, he told
Yeah.
me he wasn't allowed to distribute them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? These are
Yeah.
Prabhupada's books. There's 400 of them. So he gave them to me for free, which is great. And if he is
Yeah.
listening, I'm very grateful. But you're
Yeah.
not allowed to distribute them.
That's, it's amazing. I don't know what to say. It's flabbergasting. You know.
I love that word.
It's just it's still problems, but at least if they just allow both editions. I mean, I don't like the new edition. I think it should be
Mm,
the new edition should not be there. That's my opinion. But from their perspective, what is wrong with the 72 edition? I mean, it's Prabhupada lectured from that book from
mm,
72 till he left his body, and also from the 68 edition. So I mean, it's also like they also actually changing some of the transcripts of the lectures. Like I saw that was reading, maybe that was from Bhagavatam. I was reading the verse, and this was a verse from a newer edition of Bhagavatam, but it was in a lecture. So there was a devotee reading aloud to Srila Prabhupada, and obviously he was not reading from a post 77 edition, but they copy pasted the post 77 edition
mm,
in the transcript. So when people then, if they hear the lecture like in audio and they read, they will see it's not that verse. What happened? I just can't.
mm.
I don't know what they're thinking. So it's
Do you think sometimes look at kind of the devotee community, and I also probably speak for myself historically, is that sometimes it's just a bit too overwhelming. You're living this, trying to live this devotional sattvic life where you're kind of instructed or recommended to chant 16 rounds a day. You give up all these things, you go out to
yeah
kirtans and festivals, you want to do harinams, you have a service at home or at the temple or in the community, and
yeah
you're overworked, so busy. Oh, and there's Prabhupada's book changes. And as important as that
yeah
is, it's like, oh, I just
yeah
don't have time. I mean, I struggle myself now. I do
yeah
I work full time, I chant 16 minutes a day, I do all the stuff I do online, and it's like, and it's some devotees it's just too much. So I'll just leave that to the authorities. We
yeah
have faith in them because it's ISKCON Prabhupada's organization.
yeah Well, I think that it's, as a devotee, it is our individual duty to make sure that we are what we are reading is actually bona fide, because if it's not, then we will be contaminated by it. There is, if the 83 edition is not accepted by Prabhupada, it means there is some, woven into the pages, the mentality that I know better than my guru. And that's harmful for our spiritual lives. So I don't think everybody should go out and just preach and be very on a mission. But I think you should inform yourself, and you should read the original books, and you should distribute, if you distribute at all, or at least you should recommend the original books. And if people ask, explain, just, in simple terms. But I understand the need. Like also now, I have a small daughter, 20 weeks. I'm thinking, what about her devotional life? Because if we are not welcome in certain temples because I have this position, then, it becomes a problem. I can fully understand the certain devotees with their families, they just, want, peace. They have their own opinions, but they would like to go to the temple and have prasadam and engage in, kirtan, just speak informally about Krishna, but with their devotee friends. Now I was just 3 months in Vrindavan, and I think it's nice in the sense that there is this atmosphere. There's so many different devotees there. You don't even care to ask where they come from, or are they Ritvik or not Ritvik, or do they like this or that, or there's just so, it's just like a hodgepodge of so many different types of devotees. But the nice thing is that everyone can agree to just sit and chant Hare Krishna, and just you can leave the other things aside for a moment, and then you can go and debate the book changes online or with someone who would like to debate it. So that was kind of refreshing in a sense. I would actually like to see more of that. But I think what is important is that we are allowed to speak our minds about the book changes freely. And I think we should also try to do it in a way that is as respectful as possible, because we don't need to be name calling, and we can just the facts are enough. And sometimes I can't control myself, because sometimes it becomes too much. But we should try to just keep things objective and just be nice about it, because in the beginning, one of the reasons I did not go so much into it was also that I could see online that there was a lot of hate. Like, you might be discussing the book changes, but at the same time you're also discussing Ritvigism and gurus, and everything was just, it was just a mudslinging and name calling, and so no one was able to make some kind of informed opinion by that. Of course, there was also other things made, but I just saw a lot of that. And I thought that this will not bring us anywhere. It is not serving Srila Prabhupada's original books by behaving like that. So let us just be factual. What are the facts about it? Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you 100, 108%, 110%. I would love to see more mature adult conversations in the Krishna community, where it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. It doesn't mean that you can't be friends with somebody. I mean, I haven't said this online, but I'll say it. Well, it's obvious by my social media activities over the last year or two or three, I've become good friends with people who would describe themselves as Prabhupada Nugas or Ritviks. It doesn't mean that I would use those labels to describe myself, but they're still my friends. And we still, break bread together. We still chant Hare Krishna together. I might have different views from you on certain things, but it doesn't mean we can't be civil towards each other. And I think even within ISKCON, there's these divisions over dress code and the types of food, and what's the best way to save souls? Well, there's lots of ways to save souls. Just get on with it.
And I think you can have discussions about that, but in certain places, there are certain times you shouldn't just force your opinions or just force your eagerness to debate with someone who's not willing to. There might be certain cases, I also with the book changes, I was very in the beginning, because people tried to suppress what I was doing, tried to kick me out of, Facebook groups and so on. So I said, no way, this is not going to happen. And I was also heavy. I was quite heavy in the beginning. But I think that now, also related to your previous questions about, but this that we have all the evidence we need now. We don't need to analyze further actually in the Bhagavad Gita, because we have enough evidence to support our position. So everyone can just inform themselves about this, and they don't have to go on a mission to preach this anywhere and everywhere all the time to bring awareness. But it can be done in an intelligent, respectful way now, just according to, we are individuals. So some people like to debate. I like to debate. I like, confrontation. I like to, I don't mind heavy debates with other people, but some people, they are very sensitive, so they don't like it. So why they should do something else. It's not, we shouldn't do the same service, all of us. I think I did this, so that other people shouldn't do it. I know many devotees here in Denmark also personally that don't like these, confrontations, but they want to read the original books. So I thought that the work I did, and also the work other people do, it can help them be confident in their position, because sometimes it's difficult when everyone's shouting at you, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Then you might start to think, well, maybe I am. But the evidence is available. Everyone can check out what has been done to Prabhupada's books.
Well, what I'm going to do is make sure that your website is listed in the description with this podcast, both on Facebook and on YouTube, so people can check it out. I'm gonna also put a link to your YouTube channel, if that's okay, so people can see. For me personally, I learn better visually by watching things, videos and things and films, rather than reading a lot. So I'll do that. And also I think I'll put some references to other websites where people can explore for themselves and make their own decisions about, we have to allow people to be adults and mature and make their own decisions. Krishna's given us our independence for a reason.
Precisely.
And some people maybe, good. And some people will watching this podcast will have heard about this for the very first time. Prabhupada's books have been changed. And that will shock a lot of devotees, and they may need to go and have a sit down. And have a nice drink. But it's certainly been something I've been very passionate about for the last 18 months, of ensuring that Prabhupada's 1972 edition are very is distributed. It was when my book came out a couple of years ago about the history of the movement in Britain, and it wasn't until I was researching for that book, and I was actually interviewing the different Ritvik groups. There's around 4 different Ritvik groups in London. And I just assumed they were all the same. And actually you go and talk to them, and it's like, oh, we think this. And it's like, wow, I didn't, and you all disagree with each other. And you all also have differences of opinion on the correct version of the Bhagavad Gita. And you think, wow, I didn't know there were so many translations. It was a real eye-opener.
Just one story, it reminds me of that. There was a young devotee who left his body somewhere in the US. And there was a funeral, and so they had to chant some mantras from Bhagavad Gita, and Bhagavad Gitas were handed out, and they started chanting and reciting the English also, and then everyone started looking at each other because it was not the same book, and they figured out there was I think it was at least I won't say a number, but it was several different editions. So I think this is a really unfortunate situation. It shouldn't be like that. It's just that I think 7 editions there are now. It's different small changes here and there.
And I think as we kind of to say towards the end, I guess, of this podcast is that these aren't just any old books, are there? So I compared Prabhupada's books to Roald Dahl's books, which isn't the best comparison. Roald Dahl was a talented author and people understood the context of his books being changed. But these are
Yeah.
spiritual books that Prabhupada said, when Prabhupada said his books will be the law books for the next 10,000 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean 10,000 years of changes.
Yeah. The thing is that the spiritual books, they are what their content is, or you can say like the thing that is written in there, they are also that.
Yes.
They're identical, they're Krishna himself. So if someone comes in with a conditioned mind and start, rearranging and, changing words, changing chapter headings, changing the cover, everything that was done by, or at least authorized by a pure devotee, then the book is no longer, it's no longer pure. And that's the difference, You can say in a regular non-devotee book, of course, it's not the same book, but it's not like this subtle influence from an offensive, like, offensiveness against the Acharya mentality. It's not there in that way. So it's that's the difference, but it's just the principle is the same. It's unethical to just take a person's book and start changing it without his or her permission. It's just and also, of course, the big problem, which is now, we haven't talked about that, but there's a devotee now, Garuda Prabhu, who is actually in the midst of making a new Bhagavad Gita, in the sense that he is taking whatever Prabhupada made, the original 72 edition, and he is making it in a very scholarly way, where he has notes. So the text is the same, but then there are notes in the book. I don't know if you heard about that.
No, this is a surprise to me. There's a devotee in ISKCON.
Oh yeah, he's actually one of the great scholars. He has a lot of experience in this field, and he's maybe the most important person right now in this book changes debate, because he knows everything about how this should be done. He has been publishing the top publishers for most of his academic life, and he knows how this should be done according to academic standards. He's going to write books. He made this whole. He invited, was it 12 or 20 scholars in, for several days discussing the changes to Prabhupada's books, and they're going to make a book about that. And so what he's doing, and it's not that, because I would really like to see the original just as it is, but I could accept a book similar to that without the text change, but with a few notes, important notes, where there might be some things. It's a little bit what Prabhupada did in the Delhi Bhagavatams. In the end, he had a page called, I think it's, if I pronounce it correctly in English, but errata, like error, like a Latin word for error.
I haven't heard that other word that you've mentioned.
Okay.
Errors. Yeah.
It's like basically the errors, and then he's like, on this page, in this paragraph, and then there's a list of errors and their corrections. So something like that I could accept, also because then it's made in a way that scholars would accept. Because the argument has always been, well, scholars will not accept it if there are mistakes in it. So we need to fix the mistakes. But actually, the scholars, they just want authenticity. They don't care. They want to know what the original man he wrote. And then you can have notes explaining certain things if there are some discrepancies and so on in that book. But the text is fixed and the notes are fluent. Like if someone disagrees and we find out that what was written in a certain note is wrong, we can change it. But we can never, ever change the text. So such a book might be interesting for scholars to have. So I think he's, you should check Garuda Prabhu out, certainly. I can send you a few links also. And
please do.
Any of the listeners who's watching to also like Garuda Prabhu. Like he could kind of take some of the things I made, and then he could take it to a completely different level because he's a scholar. So I would never be able to do that.
And he's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Did he spend time with Prabhupada? I mean,
actually, I'm not sure about that.
In a big way.
I'm not sure about that, actually. But yeah, at least he did some, because Prabhupada instructed him to continue his academic studies. And he was like the first devotee in the scholarly world in ISKCON, and he's actually living of teaching bhakti. He has studied Sanskrit and I think some religion, and he's distributing, and his students are reading from the original Bhagavad Gita in the colleges. So I think he's published with Harvard and so on. He's like a big.
I've just literally put into Google. I put Garuda Das.
Yeah.
And then the top option was a Garuda Das Bhagavad Gita on Google.
Yeah.
And
He also made a translation of the Bhagavad Gita also.
Oh, I know. I've seen him. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I know of him. I've never met him. I think we're friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
Which means we know each other well.
Yeah.
But I've seen he gets a lot of, to be honest, I don't have time to look into people's, who likes who and who doesn't like who. I've seen that he gets a lot of criticism from other people. I haven't even read the criticism because I'm not interested. There's people, believe it or not, there's people that don't like me because they see me as too liberal.
Yeah.
But everything's subjective to some extent. But I've seen him. Yeah, he is a scholar and he's well known. He was just speaking at the Progressive Vaishnavism conference that was on this past weekend. I'm not sure.
I saw that. I didn't see it, but I saw the ad for it. But yeah, I don't know him. I don't know everything about him. But I think that I've spoken with him quite a few and written with him and so on. And as far as I'm concerned, his work with the book changes are definitely a step in the right direction. So we have to see where it leads. There might be certain things I disagree with also in his work. I don't know. I can't predict that. It might be. I need to see the book in the end. But so far I actually support his work.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, Prabhuji, we've been talking for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah.
On this really important topic of that every devotee should at least I think in their lifetime. Once you've seen this podcast, anyone watching, listening, try and allocate just 1 hour to looking at this topic online, trying to understand the history of the editions of the Bhagavad Gita. So, 1970, 1968, 1972, 1983, obviously then recognizing that Prabhupada physically left the planet in 1977 and therefore didn't produce the 1983 edition. You can come to your own decision, your own conclusions as to what that means, the context of it. But I think that's really, really important. And I'm very grateful to Ajit Krishna Prabhu for making himself available. There's a bit of a slight time difference. He's an hour ahead in Denmark. I was actually in Denmark about 8 years ago. I was on a Sankirtan tour of Scandinavia.
Okay.
Traveling around.
You were in Copenhagen, or?
Yes. We may have met. I don't know.
I don't think so. Yeah, I hadn't been living in Copenhagen for a long time, so I'm just in the other end of Denmark. So
wow.
Yeah.
I drove to Norway and back with a group of devotees. It was lots of fun, actually. We did lots of festivals, and Mahavishnu Swami, the other Mahavishnu.
Was it like Ratha Yatra also?
Yeah, it was Ratha Yatras. It was a whole 2 weeks of Ratha Yatras and festivals and Harinams in Denmark and Sweden and Norway.
Yeah.
And that was 8. I think they go every year, but I went 8 years ago for the experience.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So yeah, I Denmark, thank you for being with us tonight as the guest.
Thank you for letting me.
And thank you for sharing your knowledge on this really, really important topic. And I will put a link to your YouTube channel and your website so people can read it for themselves. So a big thank you to Ajit Krishna Prabhu for being guest number 70 on the Hare Krishnas in Britain podcast. I'm kind of looking like that because I can't believe we've made it to 70. And we have a lot of other guests coming up. And now devotees from all over the world email to ask to be on the podcast. And I believe I've even interviewed people that other people refuse to interview, which I don't know why, because all the guests to me are quite nice and they're quite civil. I don't know why people would refuse to interview any of them. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion and their own view, even if I agree with it or not. So if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, please do put a positive comment and send us feedback through the usual means. If you're watching it on Facebook, you can like, love, or care for it. And please do share the YouTube or the Facebook link with your friends or your family and the different devotee pages and groups that you're part of, because we want people to hear the information about the books being changed. So a big thank you again to Ajit Krishna Prabhu for being the
Hare
guest number
Krishna.
70 on the Hare Krishna In
Thank
Britain
you.
podcast. And I'll see you all again next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.